As you may well know, on the TCast, we like to impact positive change by leveraging people with unique ideas and circumstances so that we can learn from those. When you're trying to solve a problem, though, you can't always look at what's wrong with something. Sometimes you have to really look at what's working in order to implement that in your life or business, career, whatever. In this particular case, I think this is a great example of a way that we can take some of these ideas and concepts and thought processes and emotional value and place it into our lives in order to help get along and learn from each other. In this particular case, this guy has some very natural leadership ability. He works on a team that is diverse and works together, has each other's back. He truly cares about the people that he works with and for. He's very gracious and humble and has taken extra time to show us around. He even did this interview on 2 hours sleep because he just worked a homicide the night before. Yes, he's a homicide detective. You may have seen him in the first 48, but if you haven't, you're about to see him now on the TCast. Please help me welcome Detective Jason White.
I definitely appreciate you coming out, especially on a day like today.
It's my pleasure, honestly.
Without a lot of sleep. So I really wanted to get to a couple of things to give the audience an insight into what kind of guy would want to do such extraordinary work. It's a noble job, and it seems to you like it would be exciting for anybody, but it's a rare breed type of a gig. So tell me, when we talked earlier, you said it was kind of a lifelong aspiration. Can you give me a little backstory on where homicide came into play?
Basically, I'm originally from California. My dad was a California highway patrolman, and I know that a lot of police officers, they kind of, a lot of them, it's not unusual for them to come from a family that has somebody in the business. Mm-hmm. And when I grew up in Los Angeles, we lived in Los Angeles because everybody that goes through the California Highway Patrol Academy ultimately gets sent to LA. And so, of course, I lived at a couple of different places, 2 or 3 different places in Los Angeles. And one of the places that when I was about 4 or 5 and almost 6, probably 5 and 6 years old, was approximately 5 miles away from Sharon Tate's house. We lived in Sherman Oaks, but that, of course, is located up in the Hollywood Hills.
Right.
And Bel Air, to be specific. And basically, I can remember when Helter Skelter came out, written by Vincent Bugliosi. It's probably the best crime book in the history of crime books, at least in my opinion. And I can remember going up to the house. Of course, my dad told my mom, don't go up to the house, but of course she did. And
you went with her?
Absolutely. And here I was, just a little kid, about 5 years old. And I remember going up to the house. And if you'd ever been to Cielo Drive, it's a dead end. So it's just to find it, this is many years before Google Maps and so forth. So you had to kind of find your way around.
Yeah.
We went up there, and of course I remember seeing the corner of the house, and it just kind of stuck with me. Then of course, not long after that, the Hillside Stranglers were running around Los Angeles, and as well as you're about my age probably. And you'd watch the news with your parents, and that was just kind of the normal thing. So all of that was going on. And I just remember telling myself as a young kid that, I want to be a homicide detective. And it's just something that really stuck with me as a young kid. And then I would start reading more books and so forth.
So this was, without actually dating you specifically, but this was when you were about how old? Because a lot of kids would get spooked.
Well, I'm not going to say that I necessarily wasn't spooked by it, because I can remember, of course, the pictures in the book were cardboard cutouts of where the person would have been. But I do remember sneaking peeks in the book, and I was about 5 years old, roughly about 5 years old, okay. and anyway, I just remember that, and it was a very, very vivid moment of my life, and it's something that just kind of stuck with me. Mm-hmm. Of course, when I was old enough to really comprehend what the book was about, I actually read it. My parents really didn't say no. I mean, I just did it. And then at some point in time, actually, I got to speak with Vincent Bugliosi once. He called me at home when I was in college.
Really?
because I wanted to do a book report on it when I was in college, and you had to have a copyright release to be able to do that. And so I just called his law office in LA and asked to speak with him, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll give him a message." And I thought that was going to be the end of it, but actually he did call my house, and we spoke for probably 20 minutes. And probably one of my regrets is I wish that I would have been able to call him to tell him that, him writing that book actually was kind of a motivation for me to actually do this job. But
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he passed away, 3 or 4 years ago, I think, somewhere in there. But that's really the backstory as far as that. And, of course, I didn't just join the police department coming out of high school. We moved here to Oklahoma, obviously.
For work, or was this?
Well, we moved to Oklahoma in 1982. So I lived in the Oklahoma City area, actually in the Mustang, Oklahoma region, and went to school there. And in growing up,
Your dad's still a cop during this time? Or?
No, he wasn't at this time. And so when we all just moved out here, and it was just a much easier. We had an aunt that moved out here and said that this was the greatest place ever, and it was really cheap to live here, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, compared to California, almost anywhere is good, right?
For sure. And so when we came out here, I remember almost every day stating that the day I turn 18, I'm going to move back to California. And of course, by the time when I hit 18, I think I realized something. I actually fell in love with the state.
Very cool.
And so I wasn't going to go anywhere. But once I went to high school, a month out of high school, I started in the medical field. And that's where I started at Baptist Burn Center, which is the 4th largest burn center in the country.
So what prompted that? Because you kind of had an inkling in the back of your mind still to do law enforcement. Your dad was in law enforcement for some time. What prompted this medical field?
Well, I needed to do something. I was working at McDonald's of all places, and I needed to get a job. And one of the things that I was able to accomplish was I got my EMT, which is an emergency medical technician.
Mm-hmm.
I got that the last semester of my senior year of high school. And unfortunately, you just can't get a job anywhere unless you have experience. And how in the heck are you going to get experience unless somebody's going to give you a chance?
Right.
And so it was one of those things where it just kind of fell into place. And I was able to get a job at Baptist Burn Center. And really, you can't be a police officer unless you're 21 years old. And a lot of people don't realize the reason why. It's because you have to be able to get into a bar. And it's just kind of one of those obscure facts that you can't be a police officer if you can't enter a bar. And to do that. So that's kind of the beginning of a journey of me working in the medical field for about 10 years. And I've been very fortunate. I've been very blessed to have done a lot in the medical field, not only working in the burn center, but I went on to surgery where I worked as a scrub tech. So if you've ever watched MASH, it's the people that are slapping the instruments in the surgeon's hands or assisting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started out in basically the eyes, ears, nose, throat, plastics, neuro. But to really make it easy for everybody, it's brains, backs, and reconstructive burn surgeries was really my specialty. And then from there, I went to another hospital where I worked on an open heart surgery team for many years. And it served as a very, very good foundation with respect to dealing with people and just being able to communicate with various education levels of individuals. Yeah. And it's just it was a great
and
experience.
It's certainly an exposure, I'm sure, when they take an academy class to witness an autopsy or something, just to get the willies out. I think you were probably already set up to stomach anything that they could put in front of you.
There's not been too many things that have really turned my stomach. It's just, actually the hardest thing for me, and I've watched a few autopsies and such, and the hardest thing for me is not being able to put on gloves and help. They're like, no, you can't do that.
You're that guy. You're that guy. So
I am
that guy. Trying to figure that out.
I am that guy. So, but anyway, I went to college, and it took me 9 years to get my degree. Working full time. I lived in Oklahoma City. So a couple of other things happened, just real quick, and I'll mention this. Is that a couple of other kind of big things that happened in the history of really that led me to where I'm at today. And really one of them was the O.J. Simpson trial. I wasn't a cop then at the time. I was not a police officer. But of course, that was a murder trial that I think next to the Manson murders was probably the most world-renowned homicide case in the history of the world. Oh, yeah. Really. Mm-hmm. Easily. And from
Media
there
was such more broad by then. Everybody saw that one.
Oh, absolutely. And I can remember, recording the E channel while I was at work so I could watch the trial footage later when I got home. And then from there, August 19th of 1995, the Murrah bombing exploded. And that's something that I heard. If you lived in Oklahoma City, you heard it.
Wow.
And it's something that I would drive by there every day, and it was kind of one of those motivational things to, hey, let's get with the program, and let's get this college thing done with. And
reminded you of your calling at that point.
It did, and I think I'd reached a point in my life where I realized I was mature enough to realize that the police department was not ever going to come knocking on my door, kind of a deal. I'm going to have to actually get out there and seek out a position, knowing full well that it may never happen.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, my father was absolutely against me even considering becoming a police officer, and it wasn't something he wanted me to experience. And I think in large part, he's my dad. He doesn't want me to go down the road. He doesn't want me to see the things that he saw, and
Right.
It's just not the same. And I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't feel great about my children choosing this occupation either.
Well, it affects different people differently, and you've seen how when it affects somebody more dramatically for the worse,
sure,
then it can really be damaging.
Sure.
So I
love the profession. I love the profession. I know that I've been on the job for 23 years, and I can honestly tell you that I actually still love going to work, and I actually like people, which is pretty unusual for somebody that's been doing this job for as long as I have. I kind of I enjoyed the interaction with the public and
Mm-hmm.
just people in general. So that's where we're at. I mean, that's basically, of course there's a lot more to it, but you just don't start in homicide. You have to go through a process, and
right.
And it took a long process of being here to get to that point.
But that kind of experience is probably really applicable, right? You got to put on a uni and understand how things work.
Yes.
From a street level before you get to the point where you can start applying the other stuff, and applying your medical experience, I think, in the homicide arena would be something that's kind of a natural transition for you, was it not?
It is, and I honestly, I'll tell you, I think that one of the things that's really kind of helped me the most is being able to handle stressful situations, in remaining calm in stressful situations, and that's helped me throughout my career, and just being able to, I've been in a lot of life and death situations, honestly, in a surgical setting, and even though that's a very, very controlled environment. There are moments when it's not, and those were invaluable. I can't even. It's priceless training, honestly. Right. That really helped me, and I've been in some situations as being a police officer that no doubt it's paid dividends for me in my life. That's helped me stay safe.
And that's been something that when we look at the oncoming candidates, or us having, security folks that are carrying weapons or whatever, it's difficult to gauge whether somebody is going to be able to respond properly just because they have experience. You come in with military experience and you've gone into combat doesn't mean you handled it well. So it's really
Sure.
important to know once you establish that precedent, that first significant emergency, and you realize that you can keep your cool. That's really a key. Is there any trick to that other than, because you had the experience, but you still had to just experience it the first time? You think it's more of a natural occurrence in most people, or is it something can be learned?
Well, you were a previous police officer for
Mm-hmm.
Fort Worth, and I told you before that I'd actually applied there. Probably one of the biggest mistakes they ever made was not giving me a chance. But
that was my line. That was my line.
but honestly, that was one of the places that I'd actually applied. For me, to tell you the truth, you know as well as I do that anybody that's going in there and they're applying to do this job, they really don't know what you're going to do. It's somewhat of an unknown, and I think that anybody, especially now, they can get online and realize what the answers are that they're looking for, and so forth. I think for me, one of the things that was really helpful for me is that when I became a police officer here on this job here, I was 28 when I got hired. So of course, when I made it through the law enforcement academy here, which is the longest in the state here in Tulsa,
How long is that, by the way?
It's 27 or 28 weeks currently. It was 26 weeks when I'd actually first started. Okay. And the other thing, just specifically about Tulsa, is that you have to have a bachelor's degree to be on the department here. So I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I know that it's more difficult today to get candidates that are willing to do this job. But for me, starting in this profession at 28 years old, I've had life experience. I'd actually had a real job. Mm-hmm. I had been around many, many different things. that it really gave me the tools that I was able to cope with a lot of the calls that I would be dealing with. And furthermore, I look at these young cops that are today that are like 21 years old and they look like kids, honestly.
Well, 21 they are.
They really are.
I mean, yeah.
And so I look at them and I'm like, these guys, golly, I mean, they look like kids too.
Mhm.
And that's kind of hard to walk into an environment where you're showing up at a domestic and you're trying to reason with somebody. Whereas for me, they kind of look to me anyway. There would be a lot of times they would look to me because I just looked older. And I think that really helped me as well.
Good.
In this
good
job.
To be old. That's one reason it's good to be old.
It is, but listen, I'm not a guy that's jumping over fences at this point in my career. I can promise you that.
You gotta learn how to use that radio wisely, right?
Right.
So so as today, for an example, we almost had to forego this whole experience because you had a call out last night. We were just talking earlier about how you didn't get any sleep. How do you manage your physical and mental stress? And especially, I mean, you have a family too, so you have a wife and kids. Yes,
I do. Well, I mean, as you can look at me, I'm a specimen. I mean, I work out all the time, of course. No, I'm just kidding.
You've got it.
No, here's the deal. The one thing that I have to tell you is that my family read the brochure. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
When my wife and I started dating, this is my second marriage, and for the first one, there's no doubt that it had some issues with the fact that I was always at work and we weren't from here. We were from Mustang, that area in another part of the state. But for my current wife, one of the first questions that I'd asked her is I said, I'd basically stated, this is what I want to do. Is that going to be a problem? And if it is, then we probably shouldn't go forward because this is I think with anybody that works in the homicide unit, honestly, I think that anybody that works in this deal, this is a lifestyle. This is really a lifestyle of a profession where it's similar to that of a surgeon. I mean, I know we don't make the money, believe me, but our phones are going off constantly, and we may get called out at all times, so at all hours. But it's a great job that I have. My family, they just know what I do. My daughter she has no memory of me not working in this position. So, she's 16 now, but she knows that if I'm walking out the door, she's like, what did you get a murder? Basically. Yeah. Kind of a deal.
So do you feel like you, I mean, since we are in similar age, I know when I lose sleep back to back to back, there's some significant consequences to pay.
Well, I'll tell you, the worst time to get called out on a homicide is when your head is hitting the pillow and you're about ready to drift off into the worst or the best sleep rather of your lifetime. At least it feels like that when that phone goes off.
Right.
So it's harder to recoup from that. It just takes you a couple of more days it takes you at least another day to kind of feel normal again.
Yeah. Usually
Actually a couple of days for me now, but it is what it is. That's what I've signed up for. And I can't imagine doing anything different. And I'll do it as long as I possibly can. But there's no doubt that it has a stress to our bodies. I mean, if you look at a picture of a homicide unit, I think it'd be a fun little thing to do. Take pictures of all your major city homicide units and I guarantee you that in 4 years, it's almost like the president, where the president looks pretty young, but then they look really old.
They just got their butt kicked.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it has that effect on how we appear. And I've seen it with guys that retire from here and they look great after they've been gone from here for like a year or so. That it's like, man, what are you doing? That's great. So you can see that a mountain of stress has been lifted from them.
Yeah, and mentally too. So is this something that you feel like you're right into retirement, no sweat, or do you have any aspirations beyond?
Tell you the truth, I do. I think that everybody up there wants, there are a couple that want to retire and that's it. Okay. I just don't know that that's going to be in the cards for me. I'd like to do what you're doing actually, or something along those lines.
Come on.
But I've thought about actually going back to nursing school and becoming a traveling nurse maybe.
Wow.
But I don't know if that'll happen or not. It just depends. The thing is, and we really haven't dived into the unit or anything like that or where I work, but, and I'm sure you're getting to that, but just to kind of give you an idea is Tulsa, Oklahoma. We're the 47th largest city. We are, just to kind of give you an idea as to how big that is. We're a little bigger than Cleveland, Ohio. and a little less the size of Minneapolis.
Okay.
Although with the people leaving Minneapolis, we may be bigger than them, really.
Right.
If you've taken any time to drive around here, you've noticed that it's turning into like a Nashville or an Austin type of a feel here. It's pretty amazing, actually. So
I'd never been, so I'm actually going to take a look around.
I know you're going to love it. You really are. So it's a really up and coming city. We're a large city, and with that we have a lot of large city type of crime. And the department, finally, we've gotten to authorized strength of 850. But with respect to where I work, the homicide unit, just to kind of give you an idea as to our numbers, since 2016 to today, we won't count the one I had last night because, I don't know. I don't want to count that because it'll screw up the statistics.
It's not solved already?
No.
Come on, man.
No. But since then to today, we've had 403 homicides. And out of that 403 homicides, we've solved all but 16. And I know that, and I choose 2016 because that's just a great year to pick because we had 82, which happened to be a record year for our city. Mm-hmm. And out of those 82 homicides, we solved them all. And so that's something that we're extremely proud of, and something that it's become almost expected by the community here, that they're just so used to us solving these cases. It's that adds a little bit of an element of a little bit of stress. But, the beauty of it is that our department, this is a priority. And it's not only a priority with our city, but it's also with the department, but also the city. And so therefore, the price really isn't, what it costs is not really a consideration. So they know that it's going to cost money.
Yeah, that's self-imposed accountability,
yes.
a little pressure to keep everybody going. And you have a really good team, which is really advantageous for you too, because we've spoken briefly about the team and how much you appreciate everybody. I've worked with great teams and I've worked with not so great teams, and it is amazing. You could have the coolest job in the department, and if your leadership or your teamwork is not in line with what your goals are, it never works. It's not the coolest job anymore by far. So
completely agree.
So, how many people are in homicide? Do you know that number?
We have actually 10 homicide detectives. They just increased the number by 1.
Okay.
So we have actually 10 that are the ones that will get called out to take these calls, and we have 1 cold case guy, which I don't really count that because it's a little bit of a different way of. It's just entirely different. Right. They fall under the umbrella, but it's a little bit different. And so of the 10, of course, then we have a supervisor that's over all of us. And that's where we're at. So we work on a linear system where, for instance, I just got a murder last night just after midnight, and I will go to the bottom of the list, which is nice. And
but as a teammate, you'll still be involved.
Yeah, I'll be involved in
much as you need to be.
Absolutely. And you mean with respect to other murders and stuff? Yeah, absolutely. I kind of like the chase. So if I have moments where I'm able to help out on other people's cases, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah. And
that's really, when you talk about the number of murders that we have open, that comes out to 96% clearance rate. It's got to be one of the highest in the country. I don't know if there's, but it's got to be up there.
It's extraordinary. Yeah, it's a great number.
And one of the reasons that we're so successful, honestly, and if you've watched us on TV and stuff, it's the teamwork. I mean, teamwork makes the dream work. It's just the way we operate. Mm-hmm. And I can't say enough about that. And that really is the reason for everybody out here. There's 3 people out there working my cases if it was theirs. And I just don't see that with a lot of other cities. Right. And I think that really is plus of the area of the country we're in too. I mean, people here still I think by and large have a sense of decency that they don't want those people out there any more than we do. So, right. It takes some time to get the right people.
Well, and that's how we solve cases. It's kind of an elite position, right? It's not the easiest gig to get. You don't just sign up and, get a turn. So, and perhaps that's why, but in every group I've noticed there's always an A team in every group. So I won't put you on the spot in terms of that, but it's pretty admirable because all it really takes is 1 or 2 guys out of those 10 guys or gals that don't really participate like everyone else does to cause a lot of dissension and disruption among teamwork when somebody needs to pick up slack. Do you find yourself doing a lot more? I mean, I know you're compelled to do a lot of this stuff just by nature.
You know, when we first talked, you said something about think outside of the box. So I want you to remind me of that phrase. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, hey, listen, I tell the public this all the time, you know, because their interactions with the police departments and so forth is, you know, one end of the spectrum to the other. And I tell them all the time, we're like toys in a Cracker Jacks box. You know, we're all different. And really in the homicide unit, I think there's probably a touch of narcissism, to be honest with you. There's that within the cop world.
Mhm.
I think that all of us that are in that unit have a pretty high opinion of ourselves to an extent. I mean, really.
Yeah.
But what makes this, and everybody's different. So you're going to have varying degrees of abilities. You're going to have some guys that are, I think we all think that we're exceptional in the interview room. And that's really where we solve the cases, really. I mean, it's about dealing with people and talking to people.
Yep.
But we all bring something a little bit unique and different to the table.
But I see a lot of that outside the box stuff with you when we spoke, and it was kind of my I would call it my specialty, but it'd also be my downfall half the time. You get too creative for your own good sometimes. But
some people aren't ready for that creativity,
and some people just aren't built for it.
No,
I mean, you know, you've got a type A personality. That's great. You take charge of the room. You know what the law says. You do what the law says, and you follow through. But as soon as you can get outside of that box and really think in terms of the human value and the communication, the idea that if you went over here and did something instead of sitting on your butt and waiting for the phone to ring, you're just motivated to do something else, that you're able to come up with something without prompting. It's fairly admirable. Like I said, I see that in you. My wife has mentioned things that she's noticed about you that are similar to what she observed in me in law enforcement. So,
well, I'm going to bring up a couple of examples, and I don't know that we'll get to both of them in this sit down that we have to talk about it. I'll spend as much time as you'll allow me to, believe me. But I'll tell you, one of the when I first came to this unit a long time ago, one of the things that really stood out to me was the lack of assistance, and really the reason. I can remember I was almost lost. You know, when I came to the unit, I expected to be kind of taken under the wing of some of these guys that had been doing this job for a long time, and I expected them to take me along and really just plug in all of the experiences that they'd had and really show me the ropes. And it was really quite the contrary. It was, and I'd actually got told this by somebody years ago, that they said, we picked you because we felt like you hit the ground running, that we didn't need to have to do that. And I think that is absolutely one of the worst ways to run a unit, honestly. One of the things that over the years, what that has done is it actually kind of motivated me personally. Each time we would get another detective that would come in there, I kind of would take my time to make sure that they were prepared and had the tools to be able to do this job. It's not that I've cornered the market on how to do this job. Believe me, I teach a lot. One of the things that I tell people all the time is I'm not an expert in this. You know, I mean, you know as well as I do, if in the time that you were a police officer, that we can't even keep up with cell phone technology, for God's sake. So how in the world am I supposed to be an expert at this job, right?
But you have a lot to share with somebody that's green.
Tremendous amount. I think that when we have two brand new people right now, and honestly, I'm kind of the unofficial / official. I've been told I'm the official, but I say it's more the unofficial training officer of the unit. So I will schedule for them to go down and meet people at the medical examiner's office. We will take time to go out and look at dead people, of suspicious or regular. If you don't take people out and you don't show them what they're supposed to be learning and how they're supposed to be in this position, and give them the tools that is necessary, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, really. I mean, honestly, you're not setting people up for success. And so that's kind of one of the other things that's kind of unseen. You don't really see that on TV a lot. Right. And then to go into it a little bit further, just to kind of give you a couple of examples. I get to teach the academy cadets, which is absolutely, I'm honored to do that. Really. And one of the things that I teach all death investigations, and I actually teach interview and interrogation. Interview and interrogation is something that I think is incredibly difficult to teach, because you said it earlier when we were talking. Some people have it and some people don't. When you're talking about the newer generation of police officers that exist today, those are the people that grew up playing video games, the last time they've had a conversation on a phone that lasted 30 or 40 minutes may be never. Okay.
Right.
So their communication ability is not anything what it was for us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the new crop of police officers that are entering the world, and the people that we're dealing with out on the streets are the same generation,
sure,
which I've got to be able to deal with too. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent there, but one of the things that I just want to tell you real quick, as far as thinking out of the box, I want to at least mention these, because in this position, when working in homicide, and this really goes into any profession. So for anybody that's listening to this podcast, this is something that I hope to motivate them just a little bit. Okay. And the motivation and the speech that I'm going to give to them is, when you're in a position, regardless of what that position is, don't just do what is expected of you, do that much more. I mean, if there's a better way to do something, then do it. And the two examples that just really come to mind, and I love sharing these, the one of them is that one of the guys that I work with on a regular basis, his name is Ronnie Leatherman. I have to mention his name. He's a super great guy. And one of the things that he and I both had actually been sitting through a clandestine grave class. And what that is that it's basically a class about, people getting rid of bodies and putting them in a shallow grave.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were sitting there, I thought, man, that would be really cool to be able to do that. I would really like to hope maybe one day we can get a body and we'll bury it and we'll study it, Well, let's be real. The department is never going to go for that. Right. But I thought, well, hey, the next best thing is a pig. Pigs are very, very similar to the human being and the inside. That's why we dissect them in school. And so we were able to convince the city to purchase us a pig, and that had been that we euthanized it, or they did that for us.
Mm-hmm. And
it was one that they were going to do that with anyway. And we had a hole dug, and we actually put it in a shallow grave, and we studied it. And that's something that Ronnie and I did on our own. And when you think about thinking outside of the box, that's something that I felt that we did. And it was really neat to study this, and nobody told us to do this. I think that in this position in homicide, and what I tell the young detectives is, you shouldn't have to be told to continue your education.
Right.
You should be self-motivated to read about bloodstains and whatever. Okay.
Yeah. The bad guys getting better.
They are getting better.
So
you've
got to stay ahead with that initiative.
We do. And listen, you know as well as I do, the cops that are in some of these units, including mine, probably to an extent, they're not at home reading and watching. I'm a little obsessed. I mean, obviously, maybe it's not all normal, but listen, I watch Dateline sometimes just to get some tips, on how to do some cases or forensic files, et cetera. And then the second example I'll give you just real quick. I don't want to take up too much time on this because you probably had some great questions, but is one of the things that always kind of troubled me when I was out dealing with these homicides is that when we go and do a death notification, which is that's easily probably one of the most difficult tasks as a police officer across the board.
Yep.
You could be a field officer and you're tasked with that horrible job, and you're telling somebody one of the worst things that they're ever going to hear in the history of their life. Okay. And it really changes some people in many respects, and it probably should. I mean, really, it's that important of a situation. Well, anyway, we give them a tremendous amount of information when we show up at their house, and they probably retain 10% of that. So one of the things that I thought about, and I'm kind of one of those people, I'm constantly thinking of different ideas and different ways of doing things at work. And if we get a chance for you to get a tour, I'll give you one of the copies of what I'm talking about.
Great.
But I had designed a family packet, something that we give. It's a brochure. It's basically a booklet that we give to the families. And in there, it basically describes what it is that we do and the phone numbers for them to call. Who do they call in the event that they need counseling or crime scene cleanup? I mean, these are the things that really we kind of leave them with none of that when we're leaving their house, or they don't remember, or the phone number for the medical examiners, for God's sakes,
Yeah, they're in shock and
right. So
certainly not experienced in all that.
One of my partner, I told him, I said, I want to do this. And I told Ronnie Leatherman, and he's kind of one of the people that he's really good about. I think up the ideas, and then he's really good about, well, let's quit talking about it and do it. Mm-hmm. And so we came up with a really good example and with pictures of the courthouse, and this is where you go. And this is kind of the process. Well, since doing that, we've been able to put together those booklets. We've been handing them out probably 6 or 7 years. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to teach from one end of this country to the other. And I used to hand them out like candy before I realized that they actually cost the city money. But they hand these things
Easy
out.
for you to do. It's
Well,
not
they
your
hand these
money.
things out literally. And so what's happened is they're using these booklets, and I've encouraged people, hey, steal our idea. This is a great idea.
Yeah.
Of course, in my mind, it's the best idea ever.
Right.
And
Just keep you and Leatherman's name down there at the
well, we should.
on the
We
credits.
should.
Right.
We should. We didn't. But they use those things in Flint, Michigan, and Fargo, North Dakota, or somewhere in North Dakota and Texas, and all over the country, literally. So even California, and that to us is that's what it should be about. Sharing good ideas with everybody, and everybody being able to benefit from those.
I think you should definitely consider leadership, because it sounds like a leadership conference speech here to me. Because not just thinking outside the box and not just coming up with the good ideas, but actually partnering with somebody who is the person that puts an idea into play, and you can follow it through, and then you're sharing those ideas in a group setting. I mean, it sounds like you should be leading this team somehow.
Well, some people are. I agree with you, and that makes me like you even more. So you know how to read a person really well, but you got to have people that are willing to work, and really, I think that honestly, I would love to promote and so forth. I think that'd be great, but in the grand scheme of things, you know how it is when you promote, you're basically probably writing somebody's name down because they called in sick, and there's just so much more that I really want to give. Right. And there's so much more that I feel like I could really contribute to, that's going to far benefit myself as well as the citizens that, I want that sense of accomplishment too. That's a big deal.
And promote and still keep your boots on the ground, working with a team. But
of course I'd love it for the pension and so forth, but it's not all about the money. It's really not. And if it was, then I would have probably tried to get into medical school or something later on. And I just don't know that I have the smarts for that, but I'll tell you, we're blessed, and of course we're on the show, the First 48. We haven't really talked about that. And we're the 22nd city to be on that program, longest running city to be on there without a break. They've been with us since July of 2014, and we've had 2 camera people here with us the entire time. That's a tremendous amount, and
like part of the family after a while.
Oh yeah, they're great. One of the things that I'll say about them is, I'm sure that a lot of other cities and people that live across the country and stuff, as much as they enjoy watching it, they have to ask themselves, or they have to say, why would any city want to have that as part of their, basically their brochure, honestly. And the thing of it is that I think that we're entering a world of transparency in policing for sure. And I think that honestly, I think we're seen for all over the world, honestly, and it's pretty amazing. So
great promotional tool.
It
as
is.
long as it's being done right. You guys seem to be doing it right.
Well, I think that the public, by and large, I mean, of course, there's people that are haters. They hate the cops no matter where you go, but there are those. But I think that by and large, you have a good many people across this country and the world, honestly, they see the teamwork. That's the common word that I keep hearing, the teamwork.
Yeah.
And we're all just trying to, we all really care and we care, and I think that really kind of comes across on TV. So,
and I think you're in a unique position. Again, I know I keep alluding to that, but also having been in a little bit of the reality setting, not nearly to the extent you have. I've had a few cops episodes that need to be buried too. But how much of that experience takes up more time? Because obviously I think they should highlight a little bit more. Somehow it certainly wouldn't be exciting, but it would be appreciable to understand exactly how much paperwork goes into just, hey, let's cut a warrant for this guy. It sounds like, hey, get to cut a warrant. It's like the show Hunter, bam, kills the guy. He's got to go on and do something else. And so he takes off. Doesn't exactly work that way. And I know these reports have to be really diligently authored, and it's a long process and takes up a lot of time. And obviously, the audience doesn't see a lot of that.
No. If paperwork is not your thing and you don't enjoy typing or writing, then Homicide is certainly not going to be probably the job for you. I tell you what, I think there's a lot of cops that kind of want to do this job, but they don't want to sacrifice that portion of their life.
Right.
Just to give you an example, one of the reports that comes to mind, I know that one of my reports alone was 200 pages. That's a book, I mean, literally. So it's mind numbing at times, honestly. And then that you're going to be scrutinized to a whole nother level. And I can tell you right now that there's nobody in my office that is interested in being on Netflix for any kind of a police show, because it's never a good ending on that when they're profiling police, right?
Yeah.
So we have to really, really do our job. And I know for me personally, I try to do a good job on every one of these cases, and literally I stress out about every one of them up until the point of the Court of Criminal Appeals. There's just so many different things that can happen
but that's also outside of the box, because that is thinking big picture.
You're right.
Instead of thinking about what your job is, doing it. I knocked out the report.
Yeah.
I've written in the essence of the penal code that belongs in the right spot.
Right.
But you're thinking about how this is going to be countered, and you have to author it and make sure that you're not missing something.
And I really hadn't really thought about that exactly until you just mentioned that, and you're right. And that's one of the things that I do tell these new detectives, because I think that it's much easier to if you don't give them the roadmap and the expectations of what's expected of you when you come into the door, trying to do that 6 months down the line or a year later to try to really correct what those expectations are, it's near impossible. I mean, you really have to lay down the ground rules. Now, coming from me as an officer of the same rank, I would hope that they're going to listen because of experience. A couple of things that my dad taught me. If I was to just share with people, two most beneficial things that my dad taught me is going into this job. The first thing that he taught me when I became a police officer that I think is really big. And he said, make sure that your badge is the same size it was the day they issued it to you, not 5 sizes too big. Essentially treating people right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I'm not advocating back rubs in the community. I know that we're going towards that a little bit, but in reality, you can't sacrifice your safety. But it doesn't say anywhere in the rule book that you can't be nice to people. And one of the biggest problems that we have as cops across the board is we don't explain what we're doing. If you just explained what you're doing to people, then this world would be a much better place. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
On a second note, and this just came into my mind, so I'll mention this too. Don't make any mistake about when I say this, is that there needs to be some accountability with the public as well. Okay. In this world that we live in, all of the accountability rides on the shoulders of the police, and that you just can't work. It won't work that way. It's not going to sustain. You can't just throw all the blame on us. It's got to be mutual responsibility, and that includes people. Okay,
there's a lot to explain. I mean, those have to be conversations.
For that could take hours. Right. All right. So that's just touching upon that. And then the second one is one of the things that my dad always taught me that I thought was really sound advice, and that was every time I would go to a new position on the police department, which has been undercover and crime scene, et cetera, different positions. And he would tell me, this is the censored version, but basically he would say, shut your mouth and listen. You don't know what you're doing, and just sit there and listen to those that have been there and learn from them.
Right.
And I was kind of a know-it-all as a kid growing up. I mean, I think most of us are probably to some extent. So that was valuable experience. That was valuable advice for me to take from that. And I've tried to do that throughout my career. And I think that that's also paid dividends.
Oh, no question. I think that's, it's also an easy way to learn what not to do. I found when I did that also, and it's just as valuable because that's where you find the people on the team that are the slackers or the shortcutters or just want to get an arrest on the books or just want to whatever. Same with supervisors, everything else. So you learn how things go, how things should be, and then start applying yourself accordingly.
Yes.
And as long as you have the right attitude, the right motivation, and the initiative like you seem to have, then like I said, you'd really be valuable in leadership, man. I'm just telling you.
Well, I mean, if it was, I'll tell you what, if they ever changed the promotion exam based on,
you have time to study.
You know what's crazy is law enforcement is one of the few careers that to be promoted in this industry, it has nothing to do with what you've contributed to the business. You know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with what specialty units you've worked in or how hard you've worked. You're not rewarded for that. You're rewarded based on how hard you've studied for a test.
Scholastic, yeah.
1 day or 2 days makes the difference.
Right.
And I think that we're starting to see, of course, you're going to see the impacts of that with leadership because you get people that, of course, you're going to get promoted that probably have no business doing that.
Yeah.
But
this it's countering the good old boy system that used to be in place.
of course,
It's almost like there's got to be something.
as long as you have a human element involved, you've got to do something to make that happen. So
Right.
I completely agree with that. But I'll tell you the most important skill of any police officer, bar none. You know, I could probably ask you, my opinion of the most important skill, and it may differ from a lot of other cops, but
Mhm.
but it's your ability to be able to communicate with people.
on a personal level, right?
Period.
Yeah.
And not just talking to people, but listening to people.
Right. That's communication, right? Two ways.
Well, it's,
You're
60% of your communication is going to be nonverbal.
Right.
And I was a negotiator for over 10 years. So with the SWAT team. So I have to throw that in there, because if I don't mention anything about the importance of being able to communicate with people, then, and that's what we do. That's the bread and butter of our job. And
Mhm.
you have seen it too. You've seen cops that couldn't communicate with anybody. I mean, they were
No.
there, and what a miserable experience of a career. You know, I can remember a young cop outside one time. I don't mind including cops to come in and help us search. I mean, hey, do you want to sit out in front of this place, or you want to help us search this residence? And I remember this police officer, and he was a young officer, and it's really a good thing that I don't remember who he is, because I would probably still remember it. I believe me. But it
He
was like,
remembers.
hey, do you want to help us search? And he did. And I was like, well, hey, how do you like it out here? How's things going? Well, I haven't been able to get into it with somebody. So it's been kind of a slow day. And I remember that. And I've never forgot that. And I thought, what a miserable career that this guy's got in front of him.
Yeah.
And how hard that this is going to be.
Motivated by a lot of the wrong things. I think that's kind of the,
Yeah.
it's a lot of the old school law enforcement approach. I mean, obviously you go back 80s, 70s, 60s, and
Sure.
the further back you go, the more brotherhood and old school,
Sure.
picking you up and dropping you off in a neighboring city type things there are.
Yeah. I'm sure that happened here too.
And it's happened everywhere.
Yeah.
And you still see some of it. And obviously that's what usually rises to the top.
Absolutely.
That's another good reason why having you on TV has been beneficial, because a lot of the other stuff that people see when they're less experienced in seeing how things work and who's working, they see the dimwits that show up on the front page, and they represent a lot of other people. So when they screw that up, they screw it up for everybody, which is something that leads me to a question. And I do want to come back to the shooting too, but when you've run into this issue quite a bit more than most, when there is public distrust, then somebody that's not wanting to snitch is going to be a hurdle. And again, I know communication is going to be the key, but do you see something? I see it on two sides actually, and I see it actually getting worse because of the division and the animosity toward law enforcement. I see a lot of law enforcement bonding together even tighter. And I see a lot of the law enforcement not snitching on one another either, which, when somebody's, a buffoon, they need to be presented as a buffoon, because again, they're representing the whole department. So you need to get rid of the guy, you get rid of the guy. But I see it on that side. And I also obviously deal with it in the street in terms of a code, outside the fact that obviously if somebody's protecting their own personal safety, that's a different situation. If you don't want to tell on your neighbor because you know that you got to go back and go to bed and they're going to come in and cut your throat that night, I understand that, because there's no way around that. But other than that, in terms of the distrust, do you have any ideas about ways that we can start to mend that so that progress can be made, especially in what you do? You've got to be able to have people communicate and share information with you.
Well, I think we can. One of the things that's crossed my mind is I think that we always need to do better at helping protect these witnesses, and that sometimes that comes with being able to help with relocation. A lot of these individuals that are witnesses to these crimes live in an area where they don't have the financial means to be able to move, and unfortunately, I hate the word snitch. I know that it's a common term, and you use it because that's what most people understand. I prefer to use doing the right thing and having the cooperating person. I think that a lot of it has to do with how we approach them, and if I think we just have to do better there. I really do. As well as I do, and I'd heard something that you talked about where you really attacked a neighborhood and Fort Worth,
Mm-hmm.
and did a lot of good. 50 some odd arrests that people went on, and 51, I think, or something
Right.
like that. I think that with respect to that, if man, that trust, it's a constant thing. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. One of the things that first of all, I like to talk, period, about what it is that we do. We as police are ambassadors for this, for just the job. And for us as police, you said that people might be closed off and not talk about, the real issues that are going on within our business and such. Is there bad things that happen on all over the country? Absolutely. I'm sure that there's some bad apples on our police department that I have no idea who they are. I can tell you this much, that today is a much different world than it was 5 years ago. I think that body cams have minimized a lot of things that are going on both sides.
Right.
I think that we could certainly do better. I think that, meeting with the community leaders and such, as long as they're receptive to the fact that there needs to be a mutual responsibility, like I said earlier, that I think personally, I think a lot of people would benefit if as far as the relationship with the public, that if they taught more, hey, if the police officer tells you to raise your hands, then do that. Don't, you're dealing with high stress situations. You're dealing with a gun already involved, and that's namely the police officers. And then, on and on and on. I could go on and on really in depth on that, but
but that would be a great community conversation. And I am talking specifically about, which is kind of the whole purpose of this podcast.
Sure.
Honestly, is just why we ban politicism in general,
right?
Because when you're dealing with when you're dealing with extremism and extremists, it's not worth the time to pour into them. So we are talking about people in the community who have a distrust, usually from an experience they've had, and then you have law enforcement who's willing to be transparent, accept responsibility for the things that are going wrong, and have that conversation.
Sure.
I think. And you see a lot more of that. Are you or any of your team involved in any of those types of things? Or is the show kind of speaking for itself?
Well, I can tell you, for me specifically, I'm kind of, once again, it can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. I was just spending some time with some 7th and 8th graders in a north side school that is in a rough area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a program that's called Project Trust that they do during the summertime for the young kids to basically get to know who we are and ask us virtually anything, and to hang out and it's things like that. And I think that the more of those programs that we can do, for every bad thing that happens that a cop does, you know how it is. I mean, it takes, for instance, the thing up in Minneapolis, and we're talking years that has went down the tubes over something like that. So,
and the converse is true too, which is what you see a lot of too. You have, the bad guys that you're putting in jail for murder don't represent the community either.
No. And really, and I'll here's the other thing. I didn't really get a chance to mention this. You talked about some of the issues that are going on out there, the trust, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I mean, we're living in a different world nowadays. I mean, you got social media that basically it causes anything to really explode to a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
And, what was different 15 years ago? Well, I think a lot of these things that we didn't have people that had a camera and they're looking for that YouTube moment. They're wanting to go viral on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. And really, just by merely doing what they're doing, it's not helping the situation at all. It causes it to be more
somebody to exacerbate.
Oh my gosh,
just to
absolutely,
get it on film.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's not and that's not a solution either. And for whatever reason, you got segments of the society that kind of applaud that, and that's not the way to conduct ourselves as just a normal human being out here.
Right.
If you look at statistically, as far as people being wronged by the police, we're talking about it. I know that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, that's not correct. And he's just saying that because he's a cop. But in reality, the numbers are so minute that people would be shocked literally at how many people, considering the amount of interactions that general police departments or police officers across this country have with citizens across the board.
Mm-hmm. We're
talking, I couldn't give you the number, but I'm telling you that it is less than 0.000 something percent of a bad situation. Now, of course, I wouldn't want to be on the bad end of that if that was to happen.
Yeah.
But I think that there are avenues to address those things. And today, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, just to give you a hypothetical and throw this out there. Let's say I was to see something that was inappropriate action based on a police officer. Let's say he stole something. If I don't say anything about it, I'm going to lose my job. That's where we're at today. That's the difference of maybe 20 years ago. And I'm guessing I've never seen anything like that personally, but I don't conduct myself that way. And I think that for the general officer, if they were going to do that kind of stuff, they know not to do it in front of me because I don't roll that way. That's the only thing I can possibly answer to that. I've never been around that. But I don't know. That's such a huge topic that I wish the general citizens out there would realize that, I know that we're kind of in a movement to take away funds, et cetera, and I don't know that maybe one or two instances of just atrocious behavior, and it really is. I don't know that means that we need to retool the whole system. It's not trash it and let's start over. Yeah. It's not even near that. There's not any officers that I'm aware of that aren't interested in keeping people safe, and doing the right thing. Really, Yeah. Although I will admit that there are those out there that probably shouldn't be doing this job. Yeah. They're not the people that I hang with, so I don't really know who they are.
Yes. And that, again, I didn't hang in those circles either. So, but you can kind of have a sense as to who's going to succeed. Even the guy that you talked about that was disappointed he hadn't gotten into a scruff, the day or whatever. Some people go into it with completely the wrong mindset. But when you have a department of that size, you have 1,000, 2,000 on up.
Sure.
You're going to end up, percentage wise, you're going to end up with morons.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we do here that is one of the things that I'm really proud of Tulsa is that we spend a tremendous amount of time teaching our cadets the ability to communicate. And we're talking 40 hours minimum that they get just literally, and I know it's mind numbing to them, but in reality, it is probably some of the most important training that they're ever going to take away from it. And, as well as I do, if you have the ability to communicate with somebody out here, that ability to communicate with somebody could prevent you from having to get into a shooting. It could de-escalate it. I know de-escalation is the word of today, but in reality, I'll give you an example real quick. I like examples. So it's like me and my partner, we don't have partners, but Ronnie, as I've mentioned to him several other times, we went out to a situation out in another town, small town that was probably about 60 miles from here, and we were following up on one of his cases. And we after this happened, we talked about it, and what happened is that we were talking to this guy in reference to a shooting that happened probably a year or two ago. And as we were there, people started coming out of the house. You know how this is already starting the story of how bad things happen. Okay.
Are they coming out of the house because of the cameras, or they're just coming out of the house?
No cameras with us on this deal.
They're
just
agitated.
Because we're the cops.
Right. Gotcha.
We're out of our area.
Okay. Wanted to get the context right.
Nobody really knows where we're at. We're just following up on a Tulsa case. So we didn't even notify the local authorities, which we probably should have. We're not perfect. But as we're out there and we're talking to this kid, and we're trying to keep this low key, other people start coming out of the house. And of course, one of the people that comes out of the house, of course, he's got his hands in his pockets. What did they teach you when you were in the academy? Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands.
Right.
That kind of a thing. Well, in this particular situation, he's got his hands in his pockets, and I was aware of it. And there's two roads that you can take here. First of all, we're in their yard.
Right.
And we're on their dime kind of, and how this is going to be dictated is going to be based on them. All right. And us. And it was one of those situations where I could have easily went, hey, let me see your hands. And we could have escalated this to a situation that didn't need to go, really.
Right.
But really, we kind of laughed about it afterwards. And really and I'm not advocating not being safe. And I think we were being safe, but
you were aware.
We were aware of it. And it was one of those things where it was like, I kept an eye on it, but it wasn't one of those things that it was going to escalate the situation.
Kind of picked your battle at that
Absolutely.
point. Right.
And it wasn't one of those deals with, and we walked away from it fine. We still were able to talk to the guy. Everything was cool. And we explained to him, hey man, this isn't a big deal,
Yeah.
And minimized our situation there. But you can imagine what a younger officer coming out of the police academy is going to do. He's going to say, let me see your hands. And it's going to escalate this situation to where the next thing you know, we might be screaming for help because we got some guy on the ground.
Happens all the time. I know you've seen that
all the time. And that's one of those things that I think that the longer you do this job, I think that you just have more of a read on people. And listen, I've got gray hair. The longer I do this job, the nicer I've become. Honestly, I just don't sweat the small stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that people they get a sense of what you're there about, what you're about, and what you're there to do, and et cetera, et cetera.
And being able to read people too. I mean, people can read you too.
Oh,
so when
for
you walk
sure.
into a room, you seem like a genuine guy. We haven't known each other very long,
No.
but it's very easy to speak to you. I know that you're not just here putting on some kind of act or
Well,
whatever.
I
There's
appreciate-
things. There are things that we communicate. It's almost like
Yeah.
dogs. My wife always talks about how dogs always love me. It's like, I love dogs.
Yeah.
And I know the dog knows that I'm genuinely interested to visit with them. It's the
Okay.
same type of thing. But there aren't as many people, even the good cops, actually, that don't have that level of I don't even want to say it's something that you can necessarily develop. It's almost like it's a kind heart that you have, or you
Maybe.
kind of don't have. And
Maybe.
I know, and depending on where you work and who you work with and what your intention is when you start this job, I've seen a lot of people get worse in terms of how they view other people.
Oh, well,
as they
I think
progress
it's more
through law
so. I
enforcement.
think it's more so that I think a lot of cops that have been doing this forever, they kind of almost isolate themselves. And I'll be honest with you, man, I don't have a lot of non-cop friends. I really don't, for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't really know. I welcome people,
Yeah.
but I just don't have a lot of. I don't get out much, kind of a deal. but the thing of it is that one of the things that I remember,
Okay.
when we're dealing with just people, and one of the things that I can think of when I'm trying to teach people just how to communicate with individuals, period. We've got a guy that works in our office that is really challenged when it comes to interviews. I mean, really challenged. And it's one of those things that I would ask him, how would you talk to this individual different if he was a friend of yours? Well, I would do this, this, and this, and this. Well, then do it.
Yeah.
We're just out here to have a conversation with people. We're not teaching how to build a rocket. Okay.
Right.
This is not difficult.
Yeah. I mean, there's a read technique. You're doing that technique or you're using this and it's still contrived, right?
Well, to tell you the truth, I've never been through it. So I've never taken any classes. I know what it is. I teach interview and interrogation, and I've never been through the read thing. Isn't that crazy? But
well, I mean, it's neither here nor there, and it wouldn't be something to be judged upon for sure. But it's a tactic that, again, you could
right. And I know what it is.
Go by the book. It's a little less personable if you approach it in a black and white way
Sure.
in terms of just how you're supposed to do it.
Sure.
But if you can integrate your personality and your sense of chill to somebody where
Yeah.
they don't feel like you're being condescending
Mhm.
or threatening, then anything would be good. Great. I'd love to take your class too. So I did want to ask. So in my minuscule experience with the TV stuff, how much stuff, and you may not want to say this, but
No, I'll be
I
honest.
think you would, is how much stuff do you have to go back and script? Because I know that's part of the really uncomfortable part. It's a
Right.
necessary part because you have to get the right shot. You're not always on camera calling somebody else and they happen to have a camera on them while you have the same conversation, for instance. So in that type of thing, I always recognize like, man, they made him go back and pretend he's making this phone call again or something. Do they ever do that? And how much of that
They do.
experience do you
They
have?
do. I think that's going to happen with any kind of other than cops. I mean, I don't know that you were able to do it on the show like that or live PD.
We did. I mean, like I said,
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. All
We'll
right.
pull
So
up to the scene 5 different times and
Okay.
the perps are already put away somewhere.
it is super rare
Yeah.
as with respect to, I can't speak to the other cities. I can just tell you that with here, it's super rare. And one of the reasons why it's super rare is that we don't like doing it. And we've basically said, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
Listen, it's tough when you have to go find a shirt with a tie or, from 3 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, or our office space has changed a little bit. And here's the reason, just for people to know why it might happen that we have to do something like that. It's because maybe the mic was rubbing wrong and the audio is horrible.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that we're changing what was said or anything along those
Oh, no,
lines.
no.
It's that that happens from time to time, but it's very, very rare. They call them STCs, which are called scenes to come. And we hate those. So I will oftentimes tell them when they're filming me, and they're filming me now in this case and stuff. I don't know that it'll ever air, but it's a case that they're going to follow us on.
Mhm.
And I'm always like, are you sure you got everything you need? Are you sure that the audio is good? Because if it's not, we need to do it now.
Right.
Because I don't want to have to do this later.
You don't want to, you're not an actor.
Well, I'm not an actor. I'm
Yeah.
not. And it's one of those things, I'm not, and
I get it.
it's not genuine, and the public really deserves to see as it happens.
Yeah.
I will say that with respect to this show, and I've been a fan of it forever. I know some of the other detectives at other cities and stuff, and I think that they do a good job. Not only showing how the cases unfold, and it is in for the most part chronological order as to how things occur and such, and they just do a good job, and they do a good job representing the victims and so forth. So,
well, I thought so too. I didn't mean it was a negative at all, but I just thought it's an interesting perspective for somebody to have that doesn't recognize what actually goes into putting together a program. Now, you guys have had a team of 2 cameramen, and that's half the battle. Is when you have an A team of people that know how you work and they know how everyone else works. They can just kind of plug in and they understand how things go. So that's got to be a lot more helpful to do less of those.
There's a stable of cameramen that we worked with that, one of them, he films on one of my favorites. I mean, I've got my favorite camera people too. I mean, I'm more into them because of they're interesting to me, human beings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This guy's like an all-star, but he films a ton of Naked and Afraid, so of course I'm like, what goes on that? What's really happening here and there. And then another one that films on Deadliest Catch and stuff. So, I kind of want to know what the story is. What do these people really like kind of behind the scenes? But they're consummate professionals. We've kind of put our foot down, even though we've had over 20 some odd camera people come through here. Bear in mind they've been here a long time. But most of the people that are here, they've been here. They're main stayers. I mean, they stay here. They live here.
Yeah.
They live in an apartment here. They're from other places, but they live here.
That's the way to do it. That's great. And I found a lot of the cameramen that ride with the cops crews on a regular basis find hidden dope, and somebody they see all kinds of stuff. Do you ever have anybody behind the camera that says, "Hey, I got a tidbit for you," that's ever worked out?
I can tell you that I've asked him, "Hey, am I missing anything here?" They've watched enough murders. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Some of these people have been around more murders than some of the detectives we've got here.
Yeah.
And I've asked him many times, "Hey, am I missing something here, or are you seeing anything I should be doing?"
That's really interesting too. Again, that's a good example of dropping the ego and just trying to accomplish the ultimate goal.
Absolutely.
Right? But you're right. They know so much more.
They do.
They've been running a camera, but they've been witnessing all this stuff that gives you a lot of insight.
And I think it bears mentioning, I got to mention this too, that I know we're running close on time, but the number one viewing audience that watches that show are people that we deal with. I mean, let's face it. I mean, that thing's probably the number one show in prison. And
so was Cops. It was the same
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and one of the, they get to know who we are. I mean, I don't change how I do things every interview. I mean, I'm pretty much the same. And that's how I am all the time. I try to be nice. I'm not a good cop, bad cop kind of guy. I'm just me, we're not in there yelling and stuff. And my point is that, now I'm trying to, hopefully I'm not going to lose my train of thought. The point is that,
with the cameraman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just one of those. I think I lost my train of thought. It comes from being tired all night long, but it's just one of those deals. I think I lost it forever.
You can't do any better than that with 2 hours of sleep.
It was really big too. But you know how it is. I mean, it's. Here's what I'm going to say is that the general public, when they're watching that here in the local community and stuff, because we're readily recognized here in this city. I mean, come on. If I walk into Sam's and I'm wearing this, I'm going to be recognized. Mm-hmm. If I'm out of uniform, I notice people looking. Not everybody, but I noticed some people looking at stuff. It has never been a negative experience for us. I can tell you that. I've been recognized in different places, but it has never been a negative experience.
That's excellent.
It really is. And I think that goes to now. I mean, I have a case that's on there that I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've had people that, are not happy with a certain way that we did a case. Okay. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think people they really appreciate the job that we do, and they realize the sacrifice. They see a little bit of what's going on. They get behind there. What's cool for me is that it's like a virtual ride along for my relatives and people that I went to elementary school with in California that watch.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool,
except that they don't give you any credit for that 200-page narrative.
They don't. They don't.
I'm telling you, it's a massive amount.
And I'll tell you, people don't realize, when I go to court and stuff on these cases, and defense attorneys, and there are a lot of them are my friends. I mean, I know some of the defense attorneys, and they're good people too. So,
yep.
But there are some of them that are out there that are going to ask you what's on page 612, and expect you to be able to recite it, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like, come on, you know?
Yeah. I need to refer to my notes.
Yeah. I don't have this case memorized. And that's one of the things that I have to try to bring up almost in every case, because it's just so much massive amount of information, and you just can't, you know, and that's it. You know, just today I got a phone call from a lady that her daughter was tragically killed 4 years ago, and she gives me her name, and I'm like, remind me where that happened again, because that's kind of how I associate where homicides occur, who it is and stuff. And she tells me, and of course I remember, and I'm like, you know, I have a nice conversation with her, but you know, there's a lot of volume of information that you have to decipher here and keep it straight.
Yeah.
Go
okay.
crazy.
So first of all, I'm gonna re-highlight the generous gift that you gave me here, because it must be said, and I didn't actually open my box yet, but obviously I got the coin, which is fantastic.
Oh, and we designed that, by the way.
Out of these.
Super rare.
But you and Ronnie?
Well, I took some part in that.
Did you really?
The Latin phrase that's on there, I couldn't tell you what it is, but what it means is the best of the best. So I won't have you staying awake late at night trying to figure out what that means. But it's kind of it's a Greek mythology thing. Actually, on the one side of that coin, it's got a lot of Art Deco. So if you were to come to the city of Tulsa and you look around at the building, is this your first time here, by the way?
It is my first time. Yeah, I've been through many different cities in Oklahoma, but not Tulsa.
Okay, so if you look around the downtown area, of course, it's got a massive amount of Art Deco that's located here in the downtown area, which is actually really beautiful. I mean, our night sky, or I mean, basically the city, the skyline is tremendous here, you know, and it's growing like crazy. So it's changing as we speak. But the Art Deco is on the front of that coin, and then the other one is basically, I think it's a Greek mythology thing where Sharon is basically taking somebody over into the afterlife. I think that's what that stands for.
Very interesting.
We came up with a really unique coin. It's kind of unusual, and
I like it. I like it, and I appreciate it. That's very cool.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And of course, we have the disc. This autograph disc.
I went ahead and autographed that, which is it's still worthless, but it's still got a cool factor to it.
You just if you see it on eBay, don't be pissed off. No, I'm just kidding. And then the Tulsa patch, of course.
Yep.
Which again, you said the
yield sign was invented by a Tulsa police officer. So the actual first yield sign was located not far from here, about 2 miles from here,
and it looked like the shape.
Well, yeah, the shape was the original shape. It's similar to that. And then, of course, that right there is the final gift, which I really wanted. I make those up.
Not being able to open this, but
I make those up, and I really have them on standby to give to field officers or just police officers that just do a bang up job on one of my cases, to kind of give it to them as kind of like, here, man, thanks for everything you did on my case.
That's really cool.
It's kind of a motivation to work that much harder for me. It's one of my soldiers.
Hey, it's an incentive program.
It is an incentive
here.
No, but
there here too. So
there was a negotiator that.
Oh, that's fantastic, dude! Like labeled and everything else. So
there was a negotiator that drew a picture of me back in the day, and I told my parents about it. My dad actually sends those off and gets those made for me.
That's the one.
Yeah, and so I kind of throw those on the front of it, and when I teach and stuff, I give them away as door prizes and such. But
absolutely love it, man. I really appreciate that.
No, it's my pleasure, really.
And I have
very limited, believe me.
I have a couple of things for you too, and I don't know what order works best. I know you said you don't drink whiskey, but you like some Tito's vodka. So I actually kind of skipped over and took the liberty of saying, hey, I'm gonna give you a little Fort Worth rap here.
Okay.
And this is from Blackland Distillery in Fort Worth, Texas.
All right.
It's an amazing spot, but
of course I'll hold this right now, and then I'll accept that when I'm off duty later. Yes. Or actually I'm off duty right now, so
I won't hand it to you yet. We didn't record that.
Okay. I appreciate that very much.
And of course, what's life without a
very
copy
good.
of the book?
I think this is great. I'll have you sign this if you don't mind.
Oh, of course. It's already signed right there in the front.
Okay. Well, very good. Very good.
And then, of course, knowing you're the patch man.
I am. I get patches from all over the place.
So I hope this is still acceptable, because this patch
I don't have one of those.
Ripped off the sleeve of my uniform. So
that's
still
even
has
better.
The stitching and everything. It's got my ID number on the back, but
that's even better. And I'll tell you something. I don't have a Fort Worth one, so this means a lot.
Fantastic.
When we go up to if you're going to have a chance to go up there, I'll
absolutely.
I'll kind of show you around and stuff. And listen, it's been an honor. I really appreciate it. And you know, maybe we'll meet again sometime down in the future.
Absolutely.
You know, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So,
Willing to go out of my way. If you don't get called off, it's a good thing we didn't meet
Seriously.
somewhere.
honestly, it's been an absolute honor.
I really appreciate it. It's been an honor to have you on. So thanks for taking the time for your busy day.
Not at all. My pleasure.
Working on the Jeep for a while. Pay to be like I'm on a trial. Like I'm on a trial. What you do, make the world smile. Make the world you finally get your due. Water the wine. Water the wine. Dreaming things all the time. Pass on the money to climb up to cloud nine. Just love my tongue to a little. Make the world smile. Ooh, when I'm looking for an answer, I ain't asking for no love propaganda. I'm taking off my line, I'm a playwright. When you're not my shadow, you can be my spotlight. Working on the Jeep for a while, mama, for a while. Like I'm on a trial. Bid to beat that heat now. Make the world smile. Get your due. Water the wine. Just keep working now. Love what you do, make the world smile.